Today, if you guys don't know me, I'm RJ Hodges, but today I have a chance to sit down and just have a real insightful conversation with a gentleman that I have a lot of respect for. I'll let you, Terry, I'll let you give them a little bit more information about who you are.
Sure.
But you guys, I'm telling you, you're going to be in for a treat today. This is Mr. Terry Swain.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Yeah, again, I'm Terry D. Swain. I am an author, a father, entrepreneur slash mentor, coach, all of the above.
Right.
But more than anything, I'm a man of God. So I think that precedes everything because that flows over into and impacts every other aspect of my life. But I'm real big on just empowering people. One of my life's mottos is to empower people to empower other people. And so I believe that that's in essence, all of our purpose here on earth is to impart and help someone in some kind of way along the way. And as we talk today, I hopefully this discussion will empower someone. And with that, they may be able to empower someone else.
Okay, good deal. I'm sure it will, man. We've had talks before. I always felt, even from the first time I met you, we kind of seem to be on the same page with a lot of stuff.
I agree.
But you also bring a different perspective than me, which is always good. I always consider myself forever learning. I'm one of those people that I never think my perspective is right. It's just mine.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's a product of
Same here.
It's a product of how I've been raised and all of that good stuff. But today I wanted to really talk about personal development. You know, as you know, I'm a personal development coach. I really believe in us growing and looking at ourselves and getting better. I also believe in spiritual development as well. I know you're a pastor also.
Right.
One of the biggest things though that I've had a conversation with over time is personal development and spiritual growth. Is that different for us as men? And I'll set a quick foundation because as a man, you know, as I know, technically we're supposed to be perfect.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because how I was raised is men are strong, men handle it, men take care of everything.
You don't cry.
Men don't cry. Yo, man, you better not cry now.
Right.
Men don't cry. Men aren't vulnerable.
Yeah.
All of these things that we are told as young boys of what quote unquote a real man is. How do you think that affects our lives, first of all? And then how do you think it affects us from a personal development standpoint?
Yeah, great question, man. Just great topic in general. But I think as men, like you said, one of the things is we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And even today, you know, I started back journaling. And in my journal, I noticed that there's a lot of pressure that I put on myself to perform. And with that, it's like there's so much I want to accomplish. And I have to always take an inventory and realize that, you know, as myself and as a man, that when I try to carry all of that weight and it puts that pressure on me, that I have to understand that I have to make sure I have things in priority. And I think the biggest thing is that if we don't put things in a proper perspective when in regards to priority, then that weight and that pressure will eventually succumb to it. Or we'll just be all over the place and we're not really getting anything done, you know, because personal development is progressive. You know, it's supposed to, as you progress, you get better and we're ever learning. And we'll never achieve perfection, I don't believe, in the sense of, you know, being perfect and without flaws. But I think if we look at the word perfect as being mature, then we're always growing, we're always maturing. Okay. And I believe that in essence, that is one of the biggest challenges that we face as men when it comes to personal development. And even as Black men, there's another layer on top of that, because we've got hurdles in front of us that most races don't have, and they've been there for some time. And one of the most difficult things about having those hurdles is that other people don't acknowledge or see that they're there because, of course, they don't know our plight. They don't know our struggle. And even Martin Luther King said, you know, how can you tell a man to lace up his boots, you know, or pull himself up by his bootstraps, and he looks down and he doesn't have any boots, you know? So So I think, again, that when it comes to personal development with men, and especially Black men, that we have a lot of weight and a lot of pressure on us, that, if we're not careful and we don't prioritize correctly, then we'll eventually succumb to it and either give up altogether or give up on certain things that we should not give up on, or we'll just be all over the place and not really accomplishing what we're supposed to accomplish.
Okay, that's good. One of the things that just stood out about what you said was, and this is something I personally struggled with, I've had conversations, is you said, I put so much pressure on myself.
Yeah.
And I think women don't get mad at me, but I've had this conversation with women. But what I think women don't understand is that, like, people see you as a man as knowing all.
Right.
What people don't understand is that we don't come out of the womb with like nothing different than a woman comes out with. Like, right. We don't come out with a special thing that shows us everything and tells us everything. That's and right. We have this certain part of our DNA that just makes us this, this man that everybody right. told us that we should be. So I guess my question is, how detrimental is it to our identity that, this strong man, it's almost like you're supposed to put on this hero costume.
Right.
And I never knew that I was doing it until I became an adult and I met a woman, you know, and then that woman told me, you're very closed off. You know what I mean? You don't open up well. And I'm like, open up? I'm a grown man. What you talking about, open up? You know what I mean? I didn't even really understand what she was talking about. But what do you think that level of pressure to be this image, what does it do to our identity overall?
Yeah, well, we can look at it in society now, man. The Black man is really, he's becoming invisible to a certain extent, man, because, just even everything you just said kind of points to where we're at in society as far as how we're viewed as Black men. Okay, we're feared, but we're not feared for a lot of the right reasons. Mm-hmm. Fear in the sense that, we would do harm to someone, or, people are frightened of us, other races in particular, even some of our own, because if we don't take the time to understand men and Black men in particular, then there will always be that false sense of fear there that shouldn't be there. And as a result, it affects our identity because we're not engaging with those who we have a false perception of. Mm-hmm. And it isn't until we get to know them, like you said, I don't know if, that relationship exposed that, mm-hmm. or if that was just seen through the lens of her perspective, because different relationships, people come in with different perspectives, tend to see things differently than other mm-hmm. people. And at times it does expose things. I can only talk from my personal experience as well. So when it comes to me and my wife, I know early on, I was not responsible as a man because of the conditions that I grew up in. Poverty. My dad was, and my mom and dad were divorced when I was very young. And so they were separated. And then he passed away when I was in the 12th grade, right before I graduated. Okay. And so all of these things played into, it kind of set me back. And so I wasn't as responsible as a man as I should be. So like you said, when I came into the relationship with my wife after marriage now, before, it was all fun and games, boyfriend and girlfriend. Right. But when a child came into play and marriage came into play, I soon began to realize, and I think she did too, she didn't say a lot about it, but I could tell from certain things that she would say in conversation we would have, that I was behind the 8 ball, man, when it came to my identity as a man, again, of what is perceived that a man should be. And so my personal development was not where it was supposed to be. And so I believe that, to your question in regards to our identity, in my relationship, I began to find my identity. And then again, I gave my life to Christ, and, mm-hmm. I developed a relationship with God through prayer and the word and fasting and doing all these things. It helped me to become a man. And I remember we had this discussion, about what is a real man. And that, right. And I became a real man in the eyes of what I felt like I should be to be able to lead myself and my family, in a responsible way. And so I began to find that identity. But, there are a lot of men who don't find that identity and really don't know who they are.
And I think it becomes difficult because as a man, you got to find your identity outside of what you've been told it should be.
Can I say something really quick?
Yes, you can.
I've got one of the things that I value and I've taken with me from a conversation that we had is you said, you were talking about the construct of a man is not the same for everyone. And when you said that, that opened up a whole new perspective and how I view not only men, but how you look at everything in life. You cannot take one perspective, even one that you've always known, and just lay everything on the line. So I just want to say I appreciate you for that, because you challenge the norm. You don't, I've noticed, just in our conversations, and you don't accept, just the normal things of what quote unquote it should be, or the ideal perception of what things should be, but you challenge those things. And I've taken that away from you, that part of your principle and character, and to not just take things as face value, but to challenge them and see how it relates to you specifically.
Right. And I feel like you have to, and it came from me not being able to check off all of the boxes all the time. You know what I mean? Because you're told that as a man, you're supposed to be this, you're supposed to be this, you're supposed to be this. Excuse me. And what happens when you can't check off one of those boxes? What happens as a man when a woman says, hey, my transmission went out, and you like, well, I don't know how to fix my transmission. You know what I mean? Like, I do not know how to break down the transmission. Now, that does not mean I won't take initiative to help. That does not mean I won't take initiative to take your car to somebody that can do it.
That's right.
I won't leave you high and dry like that. Right. But if you're expecting me as the man to go in the garage and jack this car up and break down the transmission and tell you this is such and such, such and such, you're going to be out of luck. But now, if I'm not careful, I will allow that to challenge my identity and say, well, I must not be a real man. You know what I mean? And it was going through that one day I just said, I know who I am. I'm secure in who I am. Who I am may not fit your definitions for everything, but it doesn't have to.
That's right.
And I think you have to get to the point as a man to where you're not trying to please everybody. You're not trying to fit in the boxes, and you have to do good. And I think that's what personal development really comes in at. You got to personally develop yourself past the programming that you've been taught.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Because even, man, you said a lot then, because even within relationships, because that's one of the areas of personal development, because if we think about it, like you said, there's spiritual, mental, there's like our health, the physical aspect, there's the financial, emotional, and that relational aspect of personal development. And when you find those people who I call them covenant relationships, those relationships that pour into each other and they're valuable. That's some relationships, man, if you don't talk to these people another day in your life, it hadn't added or taken any value away from you. But there's some people, man, that if you miss, a week talking to, you feel like you missed something. And vice versa, it can go with them for you. If they don't talk to you, they can miss something that you can pour into them, or, that advice that they can give from you. And I know, especially as being a personal development coach, that, people rely on those relationships that are covenant relationships. And so within those relationships, I feel that there is some giving, some take, and there's some compromising, but not in the sense that we lose ourselves, but compromising in the sense of, I hear what you're saying, I'm listening to you, and even if I don't agree with you, I understand what you're saying, and I'm going to try, and if I don't understand it completely, I'm going to try to understand it. So I'm not giving up myself, but I am leaning in to hear and understand where you're coming from, because there are a lot of times I don't agree with things my wife says or how she feels, but I lean in to let her know that I hear you and I'm trying to understand, because unless I'm standing in your shoes, I can't see 100% where you're coming from. And so I said all that to say that in relationships, I've noticed that there are some guys, I just say I had a friend who, his wife wanted him to be more, like you said, wanted him to be more of a handyman type, guy. And he didn't have that part of development, in him. That was not a part of who he was. And it wasn't that, well, I'll take the same thing with the transmission. You say, for example, if she said, hey, I want you to, my transmission went out, I want you to fix it. Okay. And him saying, in his mind, he's saying, okay, the transmission is broken. It's not working properly. It needs to be repaired. So as men, I think we look for solutions because we're naturally problem solvers. But I don't have to solve the problem physically myself. Right. And so I think that was the issue within their relationship now, was that she wanted to see him do more. So he said, okay, I can't fix the transmission, but what I will do, the things I can do around the house, you know, in the yard and things like that, that I've been paying people to do, if it's small and minor, I'll take care of them. So I think that, you know, and that's the relational part of, I think, personal development, is that, you know, there is sometimes some compromise, but at the end of the day, as a man, our minds are on solution, solving problems. But then on the other side, it's how they want you to solve the problem. And then that's where you have to come into a place of agreement.
But I think everybody has to keep an open mind. Like you said before, every construct doesn't fit everybody.
It doesn't.
But we have this mindset that if you don't fit this construct, then you're not my definition of what I've been told.
Ooh,
and that's dangerous in my opinion.
Yeah, because you can miss, man, just think about how many women or men miss out on opportunities in a relationship that could really thrive.
Right.
But like you said, it doesn't fit
it doesn't fit the construct. And I'll tell you a quick story. One of my clients, she might see this, but we were sitting and we were having a session, and she said, RJ, I'm just mad at my husband. And I'm like, okay, you know, why? And she said, every time, going back to fixing stuff, she said, every time something breaks, we got to call somebody, we got to wait, you know, we got to wait for somebody to come fix it. She said, that ain't what a real man does. My dad, she said, my dad would get out there, my dad would fix stuff, my dad would do this, my dad would do that. And her husband happened to be an attorney, you know, and I guess something happened with their air conditioning unit or something to that effect. And she said, he told her, I said, well, does he take care of it? She said, yeah, he'll call somebody, he'll pay for it. I was like, well, what else do you want? But she was like, well, we got to wait. We got to do this. She was like, you know, my dad would get out there and fix it. Her husband told her, he said, I went to law school. I didn't go to HVAC school.
Come on.
And it blew me away. She didn't get it, but it blew me away. And I'm like, And I said, well, how would you expect him to know how to do that? You know, and she just kept going on and on. And this example hit my mind. I said, if I go get a bunch of fabric from wherever they sell fabric and I bring it to you, can you make dresses and clothes? She said, no, I don't know how to sew. I said, well, you must not be a real woman.
Wow.
My grandmama could sew.
Come on.
My aunties can sew.
Yeah.
So, and I think it stopped her to realize, wow, that construct of what some people see a woman as in a domestic standpoint may not fit every woman. It doesn't mean you're not a good woman.
Right.
It doesn't mean you're not, you know, a woman in the sense of, you know, how we see it. It just means that there's a construct and some characteristics that we've labeled that everybody should have that they may or may not have.
That's right. So, and that's good because because, you know, even in defining or the identity of a man, you know, there are some clear black and white, you know, things, but then there's a whole lot of gray area. And I believe that God leaves that for the individuals who, again, are going to connect and cover any relationship with other people that's purposeful to their lives. Because if it's someone who's not purposeful to my life, then, I mean, I'm not to sound like arrogant or conceited, but I don't really care about, you know what I'm saying, what you think of me.
It's true.
It's people who I'm purposed to connect with and add value to their lives, and they're there to add value to my life in some type of way that I have to care about. And when it comes to, again, you know, man, that was just a beautiful example, though, of how you laid it out. Because when I look back at my great grandparents and even my grandparents, they lived in a generation that was different and had not evolved into the different opportunities and roles that men can play today, and what avenues we can take. You know, back in the days, man, there were only a few avenues that men could take as far as their career advancement.
Right.
And now that has opened up. So like you said, he goes to school to be an attorney. And so he's removed from, you know, working with his hands. He's working with his mind.
Right.
And and in past generations, men have always worked with their hands, you know, whether it was on farms, whether it was industrial, whether it was in warehouses, or whatever the case may be. Right. But opportunities have opened up for doors have opened up for other opportunities. And now, again, our identity has taken on another layer. And I think that a lot of women are looking for their dads in their husbands, but they're looking for an identical. And, you know, that could be some principles and some characters, but when you're looking for an identical, you're not going to find it. And, you know, that's dangerous because you're going to feel unfulfilled if you have the wrong expectations.
Very much so. And, you know, it brings me back to, like I said, I didn't know, you know, sometimes you don't know how you're programmed until somebody else points it out, you know. Man, so yes. I'm just me, you know what I mean? I don't necessarily know this until, like I said, I became an adult and I dated somebody and I met a woman that said, you're very closed off. You don't open up well. Yeah. And then I started challenging myself to open up. And that same woman said, you know, I want no sensitive man, you know, and it's like, well, damn, you know what I mean? So it's kind of a catch-22. And I think a lot of times men are in this constant cycle to where, again, we're human. Let's start there. We're human. Everything that anybody else feels on this planet, we feel. The same level of stress, the same level of frustration, the same level of I don't know what to do next. It's not reserved for one species and not the other one. You know what I mean? But when you start to express that, sometimes it's like that vulnerability is looked at as a weakness. Sure. And when it's looked at as a weakness, I revert back to the teachings of man up. Yeah. Men don't do that. Yeah. Men are tough, men are hard, men are strong, men stand, men don't fall, men don't fall. I revert back to that because that's still in me, 100%. That's right. I'm trying to kill it, you know what I mean? And that's my personal development journey, is to try to kill that. But I revert back to it a lot of times because it's what I've been programmed at.
That's right. Yeah. And what you said, man, makes so much sense. Even going back to the part about weakness, you know, when someone says weakness, I think a lot of times they're not understanding exactly what they're not putting in context properly of what they're saying weakness is, because a weakness is not necessarily like a flaw or a bad thing when people, you know, say that. Because I remember, you know, growing up and, you know, in high school and even after high school, having that same mindset that I was conditioned to, where I would look out and see if a man showed any type of sign of any type of emotions or intimacy, you know, if he showed like any type of femininity of what I would put it in the class of, where he was, you know, as far as his emotions and stuff, I would assume that he was a weak person. But again, that was my conditioning growing up in the mindset. But I grew to find out that even some people's those characteristics are there for other reasons. And I may not understand them and know why, but it may be a part of their purpose in life requires that they not be, you know, so tough and so hard, so that they can be able to identify with a certain type or group of people that they have been called to impact. Otherwise, if they didn't have that sensitivity, they wouldn't be able to connect. Versus some people, you know, I love the saying, a hammer thinks everything is a nail. You know, you have some people who, man, they just want to fight. You know, they just want to have an argument. They just want to, you know, it's just everything is always confrontational for them. Okay, well, that may be good for you if you're like an activist and you're the, you know, you get things started. You know, you make good trouble. So, but then again, you can't. Even that has to be in proper perspective, because you can't take that back home. You know, you leave that as a part of what your purpose is. And I said all that to say that weakness is not defined by sensitivity or showing emotions, you know, and that's what we've got to get past in today's society, is learning that that's, like I said, you know, that's who people are. And you have to let them have that. And if it's not a problem for them and those who they are in covenant relationship with, then I shouldn't have a problem with it either.
Have a problem. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, that's a big part of that journey, is, like I said, discovering as a man your identity and not allowing these constructs of what society says to really
That's right.
define it. Because, like I said, I personally believe, and I've experienced it, that a lot of men are suffering. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
really suffering because they know they don't meet the superhero characteristics that society says a man
Yeah.
should be. They just know that. And because they don't know how to be comfortable and say, I'm just a human being, you know,
Yeah.
and don't get me wrong. I think every person, man or woman, has certain, I don't want to use the word responsibilities, but have certain things to live up to. I definitely understand who I
Yeah.
am as a man more today. I definitely am a better person. I don't know if I'm a better man, but I'm a better person today than I was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. There are certain things that I can open up more about. There's certain things that I take more initiative on than I did before, because the thing that everybody, men and women, have to understand is that we're all learning.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
all growing, we're all
Yeah.
stretching, we're all developing,
That's it.
and nobody has reached the pinnacle of that. I don't know if you ever really do. I don't know.
I don't
If,
think you. I don't
I
think
don't
you
think
do.
you do. Yeah, I don't think there's ever a day where you just wake up and go, you know what? I've developed.
Right. I've
Good.
arrived.
Yeah, all right. There's nothing else I personally need to do. I'm good. You get your stuff
Yeah.
together because I'm straight. You know, I don't know if that day ever comes. So,
Yeah.
you know, we gotta just, I think, for everybody, realize that everybody's human, everybody's growing, everybody's developing. And when you put somebody in that box, then
Yeah.
you're in trouble. You know,
Yeah.
I want to switch just a little bit
Sure.
because you are a pastor, and I want to speak to the spiritual part. And I know, spiritually speaking, men sometimes, and I've heard women complain about this, like, you know, my husband he don't want to go to church with me, or
Yeah.
I know this is going to be deep. You know, my husband don't want to go to church with me, or he's not, you know, I guess into spiritual things as much as I am. And
Yeah.
I see women saying, I want a good Christian man.
Yeah.
What does that mean for a man, in your opinion, to be spiritual or religious, or how does that work?
Yeah. Well, my journey has been eye-opening. I'll say that.
Mhm.
Because when I first started off, and I just had this conversation with another good pastor friend of mine who is now coming around. When I say coming around, he's shifting out of the religious side of it and, you know, and engaging more in the spiritual side of it. You know, our own relationship, personal relationship with God. And it may look different, again, like how we were saying, a real man looks different to different people, you know, and so my relationship with God is going to look different from somebody else's. And what I've learned just throughout my experiences of over 20 something years of being, you know, in ministry, is that if we have to identify and understand our covenant relationship with God, because it looks different than someone else's. Because there be things that I'm allowed to do in my covenant that other people are not allowed to do. It's the same with foods that we eat.
Sure.
I can eat certain food that may irritate you, you know, and so you have to stay away from those foods because of how they affect you. And it's the same with when it comes to things that in regards to us, when it comes to like even identifying sin. You know, sin is not the same for everyone. We have black and white, you know, we have the 10 commandments, we have certain things that we know that are just immoral. But there are some things that are in that gray area that God leaves gray so that he can define those with us individually. And, you know, because I remember I used to look at other people, and again, his religion had, you know, my personal convictions were built on religion, that false, you know, perspective. And so as a result, because they were religious, it boxed me in. And I wasn't really enjoying my life. And I was looking out like, man, these people are able to have so much fun and I'm not. Right. You know, and God hit me with a reality.
Hard, bro. Like religion is a hard thing to go through, man. Like,
yeah. And so so God hit me with a reality check and was like, you're not having fun because you don't want to. It's not because I said you couldn't. It's just the boundaries that you do it within.
Right.
And so as I began to go on a journey of personal covenant self-discovery with God, I realized that spirituality is defined by that person and their relationship with God, and not by anyone else's convictions or what a lot of pastors are preaching. It's still in the context of religion, and so it puts people more in a box. But anyway, what happened was I was finding myself, becoming a boring person, even in with my wife and my family, and putting them up under those same standards that I was holding myself to as it related to religion. Yeah. And so as God helped me to unweave myself out of it, I now live a life that is that's fulfilling. It's satisfying, it's exciting, it's entertaining. It's not just a boring life where I'm just going to church and coming back home or just always reading the Bible. And I read different books, to open up my mind to different things, because religion will have you just reading the Bible and you're only seeing it from that perspective, and you don't have any other practical, relatable, relative ways to connect with people. And so, that's just one of my outlooks on it.
That's big, man, because I've taken that journey as well. I was the guy at one point that was in church every time they opened the door. I'm not today, but I feel closer in that spiritual relationship today than I've ever been.
Yeah, same here.
It's interesting, but I think you have to get to this point to where, like you said, you have to get beyond what somebody else says you need to do in order to be whatever this is. Because to be perfectly honest, and somebody may get mad for me saying this, religion made me fearful.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you how. It made me fearful because every step that I took, it made me feel like, is God okay with that? Is God mad? I don't want to piss God off because God, man, I'm going to hell. And I don't like it too much when it get hot around here, so I can't go nowhere.
Right. Exactly.
It was a religious way of thinking. So like you said, it was, I'm gonna go to church, I'm gonna go home and shut the door, I'm gonna lock the door, and I'm gonna try to ride this thing out till it's time to go back to church and not mess up nothing. And I had to grow beyond that. And today I don't live a life where I'm waiting on something to be mad at me about something I did or not did, or I don't have these boxes I need to check off every single day to feel like I'm right, or whatever the case may be. And I think that within itself is a real level of bondage.
Yeah, it is. It is.
And a lot of men will say, baby, you go to church, and I ain't doing all of that. In fact, I heard comedian D.L. Hughley on something he said, man, don't no real grown man go no church, man. He said the only men, and I'm not saying I agree, but he was like, man, the only men go to church is men that got something real horrible going on in their life, or they going to please their woman. He like, don't no same grown man. And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
And I think men say that because nobody wants to feel like they're in this restrictive state of
That's right.
And that's what a lot of times religion does versus being spiritual. And I had people ask me, what do you mean by spiritual? Spiritual to me means is that, like you said, my construct for what I believe resonates with me.
That's right.
I'm satisfied with it enough to where if it doesn't resonate with you, it doesn't shake me at all.
That's right.
What spirituality means.
That's it.
My construct of what resonates with me between God, source, energy, whatever you want to call it, it's solid enough to where if you don't agree with it, I'm not shook by it.
Yeah.
That's my spirituality.
Yeah. And I'm with you because, even going back to what you said about D.L. Hughley, I love his perspective because it's always out of the box. Yeah. Like I said, sometimes it's not, all of it is not for me. So I eat the fish and I spit out the bones.
Right.
But even with that, when you look at it in its proper perspective, and if you look around in a church service and you see men, they normally fall in one of those categories. But I remember, Miles Monroe opened up my eyes to a lot of things too when it comes to spirituality and religion. And one of the things he told a story about a lady who was always in church service, and her husband never came. He's like, "Where's your husband?" He's like, "Oh, he at home. He don't like to come to church." Then he was like, "Well, why are you here without him?" She said, "Because I love serving. I love the service, and I love serving in church because she had she served in different ministries." He said, "I tell you what," he said, "how about you go back home. He said this was before service had even started, because she always shows up early and on time, just excited about, just doing the work in the service of the church. And so he said, why don't you just go home and just be with him today? Said when she got home, the husband was like, what are you doing? What happened? Because you're supposed to be at church.
Right.
Well, the pastor sent me back home. He said, the pastor sent you back home? Said, for what? Said, to be with you. Said, Said, so he said, well, she stayed and, just the rest of the day at home. Said the next Sunday, she got to go to church. And he got up and he started getting ready. She said, where are you going? He said, I'm going to church with you. He said, why? He said, I got to meet this man who told you to come back home and be with me. Because the reality is there are not too many pastors who are they're going to try to get her to convince him some kind of way to come back, instead of saying your first responsibility is to your husband.
Right.
Because you come into church, that's not that. Well, coming to the church service and working and doing what you do in it, that's good, but that does not define your relationship with God. You have your own personal relationship with God aside from whatever goes on in a building or at a church. Yeah. And the same way you had that relationship with your husband. So he was basically saying, listen, I know you're good with God, but I don't know where your husband stands. Right. But regardless, go home and take care of that man. Let him know that he's number one. And eventually, when he met with with Miles Monroe, he told him, he said, I just had to come meet you. He said, Miles told him, said, I don't want you to ever feel like you have to compete with your wife's pastor, because you're the man and you're the husband. And he said that won him over. Said that guy can't start coming and serving in ministry with his wife after that. So that goes back to your point, man. We've put our perspectives and expectations of religion and spirituality on other people, and have not allowed them to have it for themselves or to put it in proper perspective. And I believe that that's what we have to do if we're going to see more men really, coming closer to God.
And it goes back to one more thing. And it's that I believe that people are afraid of individuals.
Yes.
People are.
I hear you.
So if I meet you, if I meet Brother Terry, we ain't never met before, and we were introduced by a good friend of ours, what I'm saying? Shout out Mel. So if I meet you and we start having a conversation, if I start saying things that are the total opposite of you, most of the time we build this wall, like say, what now? Who are you?
That's right.
If you say, if you're a pastor most of the time, and you meet me and you say, hey brother, how you doing, man? What church you go to? And I go, I don't go to a church.
Right.
I'm already getting pushed. Like, who is this dude? So we're afraid of individuality. We won't say it, but when people are the opposite of us, or they think different, or they have a different perspective, or they don't see life or do life the way we do life, oftentimes it's a threat.
Yeah.
And we can't figure it out. It's almost like we have this one way of normal. And if you don't fit into that one way of normal, people cast you out. Yeah. And a part of my personal development journey was getting comfortable with not being kind of boxed into, or not worrying about if I didn't fit into that level of normal.
Yeah.
We've had some group discussions with a group of men before.
Yeah.
And I know if we keep talking, I'm gonna say something.
That's right.
I'm gonna say something that don't fit the box.
Somebody doesn't agree with it.
Left. And I always know if somebody's open-minded by how they accept it. Now, that's not me saying you got to sign up for it, adopt it, believe it, or agree. Right. But open-minded and being okay with individuality is saying it's okay if your perspective is different from mine, and I won't shun you, I won't judge you, I won't look at you different if it is. So I think a lot of times we got to get better at let this person be an individual. If this person says that they're spiritually developing, but they don't go to such and such, or they're not quoting what their pastor said, it don't mean that they less closer to God than you are.
No, not at all.
And I think we got to get better with that, because I've experienced that over the years where a lot of people are afraid of individuality.
You are. Sure.
Yeah.
And it's tied because they tie their identity into church building ministries and the pastors who lead those ministries. Mm-hmm. And that's been a big problem. And that's what I've been working to really help people understand better. Because, you know, I recently posted a meme, and I posted a video following up about why I decided to stop going to church. And so when I did that, it got a lot of people riled up, man. Even
I don't want to cut you off, but when I saw the title, I said, "Oh, this brother gonna get in trouble."
And if you think that's something, I'm going to give you a sneak insight into what's coming. Dildo Christians and strap-on religion. So
I'm gonna let you say that again because I don't want to say it. Say it again.
Dildo Christians and strap-on religion.
Oh, that's gonna be one.
It's gonna really tear some people's ideologies up.
Oh, it's gonna kill it.
It's gonna kill it because they say, okay, here's a pastor, a minister of the gospel for over 20-something years, who says, I decided to stop going to church. And in the fullness of that statement, it really means that church is not a place that we go to. Church is who we are. Yeah. So church is just a body of believers. So if the Bible says, well, 2 or 3 are gathered together, I'm in the midst. So that's the church. Amen. We've gotten so conditioned to religious sayings that we've taken them as true. You know how we wake up on a Sunday morning and somebody may call you and you say, I'm on my way out the door. I'm going to church. You're going to a church building, but you're not going to church. Or even after you leave the church building ministry and you run into somebody and you say, hey, I just came from church and we had church today. Okay, but all of those terms are going into people's psyche, and what they start identifying church with is the building or the service and not the people. Those who God has separated and called to be in relationship with him, that's who the church is, the body of Christ. And so I think that's the part where people have not gotten away from. And so I said decided to stop going to church means I'm really saying is it literally, if I wanted to stop going to the building, I could, because my relationship is not tied to that. But I'm basically saying you can't go to church. Okay. So that's why I decided to stop going. No,
that makes perfect sense. You said something just then, and you said we've taken religious sayings and made them truth.
Yeah.
And that's powerful, because I often say, from a basic standpoint, here's how I look at where we are. Those age-old questions of who are we, why are we here,
right?
What is this place? Technically, and this is not to go against anybody's belief,
right?
We still don't know. Not 100%. Right. We just don't. Exactly. Anybody can get offended, but we just don't know. So basically what we do is we adopt the theory that resonates the most with us, right?
There you go.
And I'm not mad at that, because that's what you have. But I think that sometimes you just got to say, I don't know. Yeah. And this statement is something that resonates with me, but it might not be truth, because where I always get offended with religious statements is in cases where you really don't know.
Yeah.
This may piss somebody off, and you could be the pastor and correct me as a pastor if you need to, but like let's just say something tragic happens. A child passes away, right? 5-year-old child. I don't know why this happened. Yeah. You don't technically know why this happened.
But what will people say?
Religiously, people will say, well, God needed another angel. That makes me want to fight, bro. Like,
man, if that made me cringe when you said it just then.
When I hear it, I want to fight you. Like, I'm pissed off, because I'm like, you made that up.
Right.
Now, I get why you made it up is because you don't understand why this happened. Me either.
Right.
So what we do in our own psyche is we have to relate it to something that makes sense in our psyche. That's the reason we call God a father. That's the reason we call God him.
Exactly.
Because in our society, something that governs us is typically a man, or it's typically a father, or it's typically that figure. So we label it that to make it make
you
sense.
talking some good stuff right now.
You know, so when people take religious statements and make them seem like they're truth, and then they try to force other people to live by it, oh my God, man, I get heated from that. Now, I don't get upset mostly about other people's perspectives, but when I hear stuff like that, and people try to make it like it's like it's truth, like they got something that can prove that. Oh my God, that heats me up. So yeah, I agree with you.
You look, man, you're on point. Those are the things that I'm saying as a pastor. That's why I'm looked at differently now, because I challenge the status quo.
Right.
And when people say things like that, man, I actually will. I try to do it in a way and in a time that's not offensive to the situation.
Right.
Like if that person, if I have a decent relationship with them, I will challenge them on that, and I will work to give them more insight on it. Because I used to be the person, where, if people get it wrong, they just get it wrong. But I care too much about people,
right.
And if I have some insight, I'll share it. Now, what you do with it is on you. And I'm not trying just to correct you, but just trying to give you some more insight on it. And I believe that that's what's happening now with one of the avenues that God has me taking with challenging the status quo of religion and church, church building ministries and pastors, because I believe that even we were talking at some point, we were talking about how, even pastors make the mistake of trying to save the world when they have families at home that are dying. I think that's out of order. I think that there's no pastor should be in no podium, in no pulpit and running a church, and they have not yet, or they're not focusing on the issues that are plaguing their own family. I just believe that because your first ministry is your family. Even if you go to scripture to try to put it in context, it says a man who can't rule his own household is not fit, for the office of a bishop, which, in turn translate to a pastor also. So when it comes to, again, the personal development, to tie it all back in, is that I have to make sure that my relationships, my personal relationships, are where they need to be before I go out here trying to correct and run anybody else's life and give them, spiritual advice. I have to make sure. Now, whether my children take my advice or not, that's totally different. They can take their own path, choose to do what they want to do, but they will never, ever be able to tell you that I didn't do all I could to empower them and prepare them and to inspire them to do the things that I feel, that will help them have a better life.
It starts at home, and I think it starts with us. You know what I mean? I remember somebody, an older guy, told me that one time, and I was talking to him about, mentorship programs and doing this and doing that, and he said, "How many kids in your neighborhood? You got any nieces, nephews? He like, start there," and I was like, "Oh,
we want to go save the world,
right?" Because it was like you're trying to establish this, but what about these kids that you're related to? Because we could probably solve it all tomorrow. And I know that's one of the things that, if you ever listen to George Fraser is probably one of the only people when it comes to, a lot of people will get out and they'll make speeches and they'll say, here's what we need to do as people, as Black men, but then that's just a speech. They don't give you any instructions.
Right.
One of George Fraser's things is every man go get a kid in your neighborhood, or go get your nephew, or go get, that little boy that you see when you drop your son off and he never has a father with him. Go talk to his mom and say, hey, when I take my son to such and such on Saturday, can I take your son? Right. He was like, if we all just did that in our own respective areas, you'll make a change. You know what I mean? So I think like you said, it starts at home. This is the last question, and I think this is really important. How important do you feel it is for us as men? And we often say Black men because we're Black men. You know what I mean? But how important is it us as men to continue these conversations about growth and, for lack of better terms, debunking the myths of being this and being that, and if you're not this, you're not that? Because again, I think we're only ever going to grow if we open up? How important are these conversations?
Man, I think they're vitally important, because if we don't have the conversations, then we miss out on keys that could potentially unlock things, not for us, but for other people as well. Because I'm a firm believer that it's not just about personal development is personal, because it starts with us. You know, it's us making sure that we're good first, so that that can flow over and impact somebody else's life and make a difference in their life. I just truly believe that, you know, we're blessed to be a blessing, that we're empowered to empower. And so what the conversations do is it provides perspective and insight from a different view that someone else may not have. Or it may even elaborate on and stretch out what someone else has been thinking, and they just didn't have all of it. And we're giving them pieces of it that can help them. And at the same time, it's also redefining and reinforcing it in our lives, because even from the conversation that we've had, you know, just now, as I'm talking, as you're talking, as we're engaging, it's just reinforcing the things that I'm doing and things that I know I need to continue doing. And ultimately, you know, people say, well, you shouldn't just talk about the problem, but you, like I said, you should provide solutions. Well, I think the first step is talking, because it's in the conversing, it's in having the conversations, it's in the dialogue that we're able to hear other people's perspective and able to provide a different perspective, or provide our own perspective, which opens it up. And then, you know, I remember Bishop Bronner said, birds of a feather not only flock together, but they fly to the same destination. And I believe that that's what has to happen as well, you know, and again, not just for Black men, but for men in general, that as we begin to dialogue and cross those intersections that have divided us, and begin to, you know, get on this, stand on your side of the street and look out and see how you see it, and then invite you over to my side of the street so you can look out and see how I see it, then it opens up our minds to be able to receive and see things differently. I often use in my counseling sessions with couples, I have a 6 that I've drawn on a sheet of paper. It's just a 6, but when you turn it upside down, it's a 9. And I place it in between the man and the woman, and I ask them, what do they see, to help them to better understand each other. Of course, if the man is sitting on the side where he sees a 6, he says a 6. And if the wife's on the other side, it's clearly a 9. And he said, that's what I'm talking about. You know, he can't see that it's a 9. He said, that's what I'm talking. She can't see a 6. And so eventually I turn around and they see, okay, it's sitting, oh, because of where you were sitting. And so if I never get in conversations, I'm not able to stand in the shoes of the other person, and they're not able to stand in my shoes. And I believe that that's why, one of the most important reasons why it's important. And I often say, when you sit with winners, the conversations is different. So sometimes, you know, you just got to sit with different people, man, to have different conversations, to be able to get a different perspective.
I agree. You know, I think these conversations are important. It's something that, you know, in the past, that was a part of that man identity, because even as men, we don't open up to each other a lot of times.
Right.
I never really understood, and that was a part of my personal development journey, until I started talking to, you know, other men that was kind of on my same page of wanting to be better. Not necessarily had the same perspective or the same goals or from the same background, but just wanted to be better, that I started hearing them. And like you said, some of the things that they would say, I would go, I thought that too.
Yeah.
I'm not that different, you know.
Right. I'm not alone.
Okay, so you don't know how to fix the transmission either? Dang, bro, I feel good about myself now. Like, okay, thought I was the only one. You know what I mean? Like it was that. So I think a lot of times as men, these conversations are healthy, because a lot of times we're not good at expressing. And on top of that, like you said, I think men and women, we just traditionally have different perspectives. So it might be a 9 to me, it might be a 6 to her. So if you're only encountering that, the one thing about men is that if we keep encountering the opposite, we tend to close back up.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
so these conversations among other men that may be beyond where you are, but still can go, I remember when I thought just like that.
Right.
It also helps you to get more comfortable with opening up to the opposite sex and not worrying about how she's going to take it, or if she comes back with criticism or not being able to understand or challenges your perspective. You're a better man now because you've been expressing your perspectives on a regular basis.
That's right.
They may have already been challenged. You've gotten comfortable with saying, my perspective doesn't have to be necessarily right. It's just mine. You know what I mean? And that's how I share with people. I'm not telling you what I'm telling you is right.
Right, exactly.
I don't know what right is at this point.
Right.
I just tell you that this is RJ Hodges of who I am today. Now, talk to me in 5 years. Some of this stuff I said today might be totally different.
Same here.
Don't know, but this is my perspective today. And by me sharing that, hopefully, not only does it stretch me and it helps me to grow and see other ways, but it helps somebody else to do the same thing.
I agree. I just want to say this, that, you know, because we were talking about, you know, personal development as relates to men and women. Another reason for the conversations is good because now women can have a seat inside of the room and hear what we're saying. Mm-hmm. And so it's not, and it's different when you're listening to it and you're being told it. And I found that to be true with my children, because I can tell them things, man, they'll go out and listen and hear it. I'm telling them, but they'll go out and hear it somewhere else.
Yeah, that's right.
And they'll come back. I'm like, that's the same thing I told you. So I believe that it can be the same for women, that, you know, just having a seat in the room to hear what we're saying, they can begin to understand it versus us trying to explain it and talk to them and tell them sometimes.
I agree with that, because there's certain things that I've, you know, in coaching sessions, I represent somebody that's non-biased to, you know, most women. Right. And over the time that I've been doing this, I would venture to say probably 90 to 95% of my clients have always been women.
Yeah.
Is what it is. But being able to tell them something from a man's perspective who I'm non-biased, like whatever I say doesn't really affect them in the way their husband might say it, they see it in a different way. I told a client the other week, and she came back and she sent me a message. She said, RJ, I did the exact opposite of what you said, but now I get what you said, because I told her, I said, you know, she told me, she said, you know, my love language is words of affirmation, right? And that's a whole nother soapbox, because we focus on this love language thing so much. I'm like, what were y'all at before that came out? Like, anyway, you know, like, this ain't been out that long. All of a sudden, can't nobody function unless you know my love language. What was you doing?
Know my language
when there wasn't no love language book. But anyway, and she said, well, you know, when my husband doesn't say certain things like I love you and things like that, she said, you know, I'll let him know. And I said, well, that's not a problem. I said, well, how do you let him know? Well, I let him know you don't, you know, you don't never tell me. I said, woo. I said, so let me tell you, the two curse words for men is never and always.
That's right. I like that.
When you say never to me, that means I've never done it. And I just did it a week ago. So I'm defensive. If you say I always do it, I ain't did that in 2 years, you know. So I think sometimes to hear it from, like you said, from the outside looking in, where it's not directed to you.
Exactly.
You understand it in a different way. You see it in a different way. And I think that's helpful to men and women, because obviously there's some stuff that we can say that probably drives women absolutely crazy, and we just don't know it. You know what I mean? Like we can't, we can't get it. So I think, you know, and I'll put this out, you know, I'll put this conversation out there, and I'm sure some woman is going to look at it and see it and go, always and never. I say that all the time.
That's right.
I said, try this. I said, the next time, instead of reinforcing that in this negative way, why don't you tell this man this? Hey, listen, baby, I love when you say I love you to me. When you say I love you to me, it just does something to
That's right. Reinforce.
I wish you would say it all the time. That man will tell you he loves you every 10 minutes. Why? Because you reinforced it in a different way.
That's right.
Versus, and the same thing for a man. If you want your girlfriend, wife, fiance, whatever, let's just say hypothetically, to cook more, you don't never cook. You know, every time I come home, she ain't cooking nothing, brother.
Yes.
But if you come home and be like, babe, I love your cooking.
I love when you cook.
Babe, I be at work sometimes just thinking about, man, if she cooked today, I'm gonna pass out. Boy, that girl can cook. I love when she cook.
Yes, sir.
She gonna cook every chance she get a chance.
That's right.
With a cutting board out, she cutting something up. Why?
Right.
Because it's being reinforced a different way. So, you know, inadvertently, sometimes I feel like, and maybe I shouldn't say this, I should pay my clients, because by talking to them, I'm able to grow myself.
Exactly.
Because I'm like, wow, you know what? I never looked at it from this outside in perspective, and
that's right.
Does something. So I think these conversations, you know, are needed.
Yeah,
and they're going to help a lot of people.
I agree.
Last but not least, man, tell people how they can reach you, how they can get in contact with you.
Okay, sure. So again, my name is Terry D. Swain. You can reach me on all social media platforms at Terry D. Swain. That's Instagram, that's Twitter, that's Facebook, also YouTube, and also I have my webpage is terrydswain.com. If you are looking for either of the books that I've written 2 books so far. One is The Quiet Devil. One is 3D Ministry, Maximize Your Ministry Potential. They're both on Amazon and on all major book retailers sites, and also on my site, terrydswain.com. The Quiet Devil is basically about issues that we have, or dangerous habits and that we may have that we don't realize they're there, or we don't take them serious enough on the danger that they could cause in our lives. Mm-hmm. So The Quiet Devil is a great book if you're dealing with anything from stress or, you know, bad eating habits, bad tendencies, harmful habits. And 3D Ministry is basically Maximize Your Ministry Potential is basically a journey through, you know, what we talked about earlier about my life transitioning from religion to relationship to understanding God in the context of an individual relationship, instead of, you know, me finding my identity connected to a church. Mm-hmm. And Maximize Your Ministry Potential just basically means you can discover what your personal purpose and ministry or assignments are in life, and you can begin to maximize those, and you can begin to fulfill those in a way that's not religious, but in an everyday relative way. So, but yeah, that's my information. And anyone who needs to contact me about any type of speaking engagement, anything, you can find all my contact information on any one of those social media sites.
Okay, good deal. Well, brother, I definitely appreciate you. It's always a pleasure to talk.
Thank you for the platform, man.
We definitely have to do this again. You know, maybe we'll be able to include some other brothers in this, man, and kind of get, you know, some other perspectives, some other insight. But I appreciate your time, man. We'll definitely talk again soon.
Yes, sir. All right. Have a good one. God bless you.